All right, guys, welcome into another episode of 410 Sports Talk. Really excited to bring in a new guest and new friend of the show. As always, I'm Glenn Martin. This is my co-host, Glenn. I'm not Glenn Martin. I am absolutely not. I'm going to start that one over.
You wish, Jimbo.
All right. Hey, guys, welcome in. This is James Haskell with 410 Sports Talk. As always, my co-host, Glenn Martin. Really excited to update you guys on all the new news with free agency and Ravens news that we've seen lately. A new guest and friend of the show. We're really excited to have on Brian Black from 410. Glenn.
Barstool.
Guys, James Haskell, 410 Sports Talk. Really excited to bring another episode to you guys. I'm James Haskell, as I said. This is my co-host, Glenn Martin. We're going to get into all the free agency updates in the last 48 hours, and we're going to get into some Ravens talk with what we consider to be a serious insider when it comes to the Ravens, Brian Black from Barstool Sports. Thank you for coming on the show, man.
Pleasure to be here. These are weird times, and I think NFL free agency is kind of keeping us all moving along, and it's kind of the light at the end of the tunnel, given everything going on. But, it's an exciting time to be here, exciting time to talk some football because it's all there's really to talk about at this point. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And with a lot of the big fish already gone, of course, Tom Brady leaving yesterday, I want to talk about a couple of the guys that are still left out there. And I want to start with Cam Newton. It looks like the Panthers have been trying to trade him for quite some time now, but that contract seems to be getting in the way, maybe some question marks. So it looks like they may release him. So where do you think he ultimately ends up?
It's hard to give an exact answer on that, but in terms of a team that would be looking to bring him on, it takes a real commitment to bring on a guy like Cam Newton because he brings a different element than most quarterbacks, most traditional type of offenses. We've seen what he can do in terms of the MVP season. I want to say it was 2015. But it would take a real investment for a team to do something like that. And right off the bat, I can't think of a team that's ready to make that type of investment. Did the Nick Foles trade go through to Chicago?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are predicting maybe the Chargers because they only have Tyrod Taylor in-house right now, and they're kind of similar.
Right, there's a little bit of overlap there. While they're both kind of running quarterbacks, one's a little more power, one's a little more speed, but there's some overlap there. Trying to rack my brain for an answer on this. So he's just nowhere near backup material. Miami would be kind of an interesting one. I haven't really heard anybody float that one out there, but clearly they're looking for a quarterback here in this draft, and Tua is supposed to be their guy. So you never know whether or not New England, it'd be a real interesting situation for them to bring on a guy like that when they've had a very traditional, pro-style offense with Tom Brady. But it would be really interesting to see what kind of concepts that Bill Belichick could put into place. He likes to pick the brains of guys like Nick Saban and these college guys who have innovative offensive systems, and that seems to be the kind of system that Cam Newton has thrived in the past. So in terms of what we've heard as to what team he might go to, there's not really anything of substance out there rumor-wise, but those are just some speculation fits from, that I can think of. So.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. I think the Patriots one, I've predicted that Jameis Winston is going to the Patriots because it's the ultimate Bill Belichick move.
He's crazy. Yeah, he's not bringing that turnover machine to New England. But
who knows what a typical Bill Belichick move is at the quarterback position. It's just.
I guess that's true.
It's so wild to think about. It may have been Tom Brady and build around that and go from there. He may have been the one constant and that gave him the freedom to kind of do all these different things. And so it's going to be very interesting to see if they stick with Stidham up there or they draft somebody or I don't know. It's a fluid situation up there in New England.
Yeah, absolutely. The other name that I heard in trade talks and then, of course, today they finally released him, and I was kind of surprised about it, was Todd Gurley let go by the Los Angeles Rams. Surprised and not. I thought that he would get some traction when it came to a trade, but they weren't able to. What's your initial reaction to that?
I think it's teams wisening up in terms of the cap utilization for running backs. It hasn't been a secret for it feels like a decade now that you don't build a team around running backs. And little by little, these contracts they've been given out. You know, the Jets with Le'Veon Bell last year, but it just goes to show that these running backs, they get hurt often, and that's definitely what happened with Gurley. And when that happens, it kind of constricts your ability to build around the rest of your team. Whereas you can still find success with running backs much cheaper. And I think us in Baltimore know that as much as anybody. You know, a guy like Justin Forsett came in, and we did give him an extension, but we kind of plugged him in, and he had great success. And then we've seen little pockets of success for other guys in the time since then. Why am I blanking on the fellow from Arkansas?
Alex Collins. Yeah.
Gus Edwards.
Gus Edwards has had a lot of success, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Teaming up with Lamar Jackson, but that's a whole different conversation. But it just goes to show that these running backs and such, they're kind of plug and play, and you don't build a team around them. So maybe the Rams were one of the last teams to come to that realization, and that's why they were kind of stuck in a position with an asset with little to no value given the contract attached to it.
Gus Edwards is my boy, so we might have to have a separate conversation about that. Glenn gives me a hard time because I'm Gus fan number one, man.
He's an okay player, but that is where it ends, okay? I don't think he's a starter.
Who's to say who's a starter and who's not? That's kind of the point. It's who can be adequate enough to be plugged into an offense, and I think there's just a much larger pool of those types of guys than there are starting positions. So that's just today's NFL, in my opinion. I don't know, but Gus Edwards falls into that bucket for sure in my mind.
Yeah, certainly helps when you got Lamar Jackson on your team. But one big fish that's still out there is Jadeveon Clowney. A lot of people expected him to land a huge contract, but as the time goes, I wonder if those numbers are going down. Maybe that market is shrinking. So, do you think he ultimately goes back to Seattle, or do you think he finds a new home?
I think he ends up going back there. He is a pass rusher, and I think that those are the kind of positions that teams are really holding high in value these days. And it comes down to whether or not Seattle was terribly pleased with what they got out of him last season, and that's kind of for them to answer. It doesn't seem as though they're terribly thrilled, and that also seems to be the consensus of his time in Houston. He shows these pockets where he's dominant, but then he can kind of disappear from time to time. And I think that might be the hesitation for him out on the market. But it doesn't seem like there's been that movement on the pass rush market where the way that it seems to be in years past. And I don't know how much that has to do with the whole coronavirus situation or anything like that. But it's an interesting situation for sure. He's a big name, and we all know what he's capable of. So ultimately, I don't have a better answer than Seattle. I don't know who else has the cap space and the need at that position at this point, but he may be the domino that kind of sets the market for even us to evaluate Judon's value and what we can get for him on the trade market, because not to jump into another topic on that, but we're not sure right now if he's going to be on the roster or not, or if we just tagged him for the ability to trade him. So I think what happens with him will impact the way teams kind of react and impact their interest level in trying to trade for Judon. So we'll see.
Well, let's get right into that. I think that's a really good segue because we wanted to have some Ravens talk too, of course. So what do you think is going to happen to Judon? I mean, there's a lot of differing opinions, and like you said, there's a lot of options, right? There's a lot of things they can do with him. They can extend him, leave him on the tag, or try and facilitate a trade. Based on your gut, what do you think is going to happen?
My gut says is that they're gonna extend him. That seems to be the trend with the Ravens and the guys that they tag in the past. Now, with that said, it seems interesting that they've invested this much on the defensive line, and that that's, it's in line with our organizational philosophies to invest in the front seven there on defense, but it just seems like we have potentially over-invested ourselves in that position. And hopefully, I mean, the cap numbers on these new acquisitions haven't exactly been flushed out in terms of year by year. So we don't know what the impact is for the upcoming 2020 season. But on the surface, it seems as though his $17 million or so cap number with the tag is a little too much for us to kind of deal with, and still want to do the things we need to do at other positions here this offseason. So I think the solution to that is either to trade him or to figure out an extension that can kind of backload some of that money and ease some of the cap pressure that is kind of brewing as, the situations evolve here early in the offseason. So.
Yeah, well, with Michael Pierce signing with the Vikings, and we know that the Ravens did a lot to bring in a lot of help to replace him. If they end up keeping Judon at that tag, do you think that the Ravens are now done in free agency?
I think they're done in this kind of initial phase where these fresh free agents that are coming off expiring contracts. They're not hunting per se, but they're always gathering is the way I would put it. The Ravens are always kind of sitting back and waiting for these cuts that happen around the league that don't affect their the draft pick compensation that Ozzie Newsome and Eric DeCosta have mastered so well. They're all about those guys that get cut, and you can get them kind of off the bargain bin. I feel as though the middle linebacker position is a place where they'll fill somebody in through that method. And probably a little bit of depth on the offensive line, and then the rest they'll probably try to address through the draft. And who knows if any potential trade with Judon would involve a player or not, but it may be wise if they are committed to trading him, finding a team that has a starter-capable guard to kind of plug in should they not pick somebody early who's ready to start from day one at the guard position. So
interesting. I also wanted to talk about, of course, the news that we saw today with Joe Flacco, who is, a beloved guy here in Baltimore. And I know that sometimes people, because we have Lamar and we're riding high right now, I fall into this camp, tend to talk a little bit of trash on Joe. But we need not forget that he won us the Super Bowl. I mean, it's a team game, but he was the quarterback, and went on an incredible run. And I think he deserves the utmost respect from our fans. So he has been cut by the Broncos. He's 35 years old, made millions of dollars. I've heard that he wants to keep playing. Do you think he would take a backup spot, or what do you think is going to be made of Joe Flacco?
It's really interesting. You're absolutely right that he deserves the utmost respect from us around here. I'm a big Joe guy myself. You say that you talk some trash on him here and there. I understand both camps, but I owe the guy so much, not just for winning the Super Bowl, but he gave me a lot of blog content over the years. And shame on Denver, by the way, John Elway and that whole regime over there did not know how to use him properly. That's my opinion, and I'm going to stick to that. It's tough to say if he's really still capable of being a starter, as much as it pains me to say that. And this probably goes for most of his career. He really is a guy that needs a lot of things in place around him for him to thrive. Maybe he isn't quite that guy who you can just put on a team and then say, hey, this is the situation at hand, and then he'll find success in that own way. He kind of needs, especially in his mid-30s here, an offensive line that can really block. I think he needs a balanced offense. And he needs some weapons at the receiver position. And I don't know that there's a starter available or starter competition out there that kind of fits that mold. So if I were to make a recommendation to him, it would probably be see if you can figure something out with New England, as much as I hate to say that, or potentially retire. But I do know that the whole backup conversation is one that's been floated out there by a few people, citing Philadelphia, who he obviously has childhood and hometown ties to, and the New York Jets, who had Joe Douglas, who scouted him and ultimately kind of pushed the organization here in Baltimore to draft him. So I hope he doesn't retire. I hope he can find a place to find another way to have some success. Maybe Philadelphia at the backup spot is that spot, because Carson Wentz has been proven to be a little bit fragile. But I don't know. There's a lot of unknown here for Joe Flacco, and we'll see how the market develops here as the offseason continues.
I also thought, I don't know offhand, I wonder who the Vikings backup is, only because of his connection to Kubiak.
That's a fair question.
You know,
He had his best season with Kubiak.
My old school brain wants to think Joe Webb, but that's like a good 7 or 8 years ago.
Man. Yeah.
Permanent backup quarterback there in Minnesota, but
Mr. Do-It-All. Yeah. All right. So, well, after the free agency, you mentioned that they might not be done, but they're certainly not actively hunting anymore, as you put it. So now we have the draft coming up in about a month, and so I wanted to get your take. See, I'm gonna present my case, and then I'll present Jimmy's to the best, and you decide on who you think's a little closer. So, with the additions of these big fellas up front, it's my take that it kind of makes me lean in the direction of them taking an inside linebacker, one of these fast guys that might not be able to take on the guard that's pulling, but now with those big hogs up front, he might not have to. So let's get a sideline to sideline linebacker. Now Jimmy, on the other hand, sees Yonda go out the door. He sees Skura coming back from a major injury and a little uncertainty at left guard, and he wants us to go interior line with the first pick, a plug and play guy. So if you would please settle our little bet here, and then also or you could go a whole nother direction wherever you want to go. Where should they go with their first pick?
Between the two options that you've laid out there, I am going in the direction of the interior lineman. Maybe not necessarily because I just think it's the organizational philosophy is to kind of build on the inside, build the offensive line, build the beef. And I think that the running back equivalent on the defensive side of the ball in the modern NFL here is that the middle linebacker is a position that doesn't require a significant amount of investment. I feel as though the days of seeing some of these middle linebackers, these Brian Urlachers and Ray Lewis types, seeing them drafted in the middle first round, late first round is kind of come and gone. There's some guys out there like Devin Bush that are kind of special, that are very good, that maybe warrant such a pick. But I just don't think that's – I think any inside linebacker that is worth a first-round pick, another team will value them higher than we will, and that's kind of it's a testament to the type of drafting philosophy that the Ravens have. So it's not that middle linebacker is not in a position need that needs to be addressed. I just think that's just kind of a philosophy of the Ravens. So
would you go interior line, or is that just between where would you think they go?
Probably interior lineman, but you never know how the draft plays out. Being this far back at 28th lends a lot of opportunity for things to go sideways, or for a lot of, obviously, 27 players go off the board before you have a chance to go. So it would probably be interior lineman if that player is there, and if it's not, it's going to be a move back situation. Nobody really does that better than the Ravens. I can't really think of another position of need. Some people have floated the idea out there that they could take a receiver in the second round in a row. I don't know that that's the most prudent choice given the type of offense that the Ravens run. I just don't think that the emphasis for the wide receiver position is as high as for some other teams. You can get a receiver that can do some of the things we need them to do, like block downfield, block, set the edge, in a later round than the first round. So I don't think that wide receiver is that position. So that really just leaves that linebacker position. If there's a pass rusher that's there at the right spot, I don't think that they're going to pass on the opportunity to take that player, but some of that is contingent upon whether Judon is here or not. So yet to be seen.
Yeah, and one more. They have a lot of middle round picks. They have 2 2s, 2 3s, 2 4s. and of course their first overall pick. So with that number of picks, do you anticipate maybe that they could even consider moving up? Because that's an awful lot of players that are going to have to make your roster, because I can't remember if the Ravens have ever cut a player that they drafted that year. So do you think there's a chance they could use some of that capital to move up?
It's always a possibility. They definitely have a pretty hard set, player rankings in terms of who they want to go after. And when they like a guy, they do go after him. Sometimes that requires moving back before moving up, and they always play around with it. But if the right player is there at the right position, I don't think that they would hesitate to make such a move. There's been situations in the past where they've tried to do such a thing, even 2016 with Ronnie Stanley ending up being picked. I know that they really coveted Jalen Ramsey, but they couldn't, you can only do so much as the people ahead of you are willing to deal with you. So we'll see. It just seems like they're more likely to fall back than move up. I think they have a philosophy that the draft it's like throwing darts, and the more darts you have, the higher you can score. So I think that's just a preference. So we'll see.
It's going to be an interesting one because, like Glenn said, there's a lot of ammunition to go either way against the grain. And against the grain, referring to, like you said, Ravens have a tendency to move back than they do to move up. So, we could see some fireworks. I think it's going to be really exciting. We'll definitely be keeping up with you on Twitter and making sure to get your insight. We always appreciate it and really enjoy it. So where can our viewers follow you? Where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter right now at Barstool Banks. I believe it or not, I do not have an Instagram. That's kind of like
join the club.
I kind of set my feet in the ground about that like 4 years ago, and I've just kept my feet in there, and more people get it and they use it, and they kind of push my buttons about it, and I just have to push back harder. But I am considering making one, because it's to kind of segue into just a little message here as all this coronavirus stuff is going on. I live in the city here in Baltimore. There's a lot of restaurants that are in tough times, and they're trying to keep their businesses afloat. And, there's a lot of delivery restaurants that are kind of subpar that you typically may have on a lazy Sunday just settled for some mediocre pizza. And, those businesses are going to be fine because that's what they depend on, and they're probably thriving more now than ever. But these businesses that usually rely on patrons coming in and buying drinks and all these things, they're trying to keep their businesses afloat by selling food, by delivery, by takeout. So I'm trying to encourage people here in Baltimore to support these places and buy their food, tip their workers as best as they can, and try to take care of our own here in the city. So I'm trying to send that message out to everybody. I'm starting to do these things on Twitter where I'm ordering food and I'm doing a little live stream and just chatting it up. So if you want to follow me and join me on those things, I'd love to have you. And with that said, to tie it back to where I started, I'm considering making an Instagram, because Instagram may or may not be a better platform to kind of get that out there with people. And it's an opportunity for me to kind of build a follower base on there, because I'm so far behind the ball on that front. So that's my spiel. Support Baltimore businesses. So, yeah.
Awesome. We appreciate having you on the show, man. Look forward to, like I said before, and like you just mentioned, following you on Twitter and staying up to date as the news drops. We'll be interested to see how, as the Ravens keep gathering, what ends up happening in that second layer of free agency. But we thank you again, and we'll absolutely stay in touch.
Sure. It was
Thanks,
fun
Brian.
being here.
Have a good one.
You too.